in the second semester of physics, and I'm talking about the algebra-based physics here, a lot of times it looks like the goal of the course is to talk about things like the electric field, E, the magnetic field, B, light, and Maxwell's equations, and maybe things like that. Those are important things. But one of the things that ties everything together is energy. So let me show you just a couple of examples, things that I think are important. That's important. If you're a biology major or engineering technology, and you're not doing the hardcore physics where you do all of the calculus and stuff, then this is the thing that you need to get out of there. What is this? Look at that. This is a solar panel. They're pretty important, I think. We use them a lot in a lot of different situations. Maybe they become more important. But just to talk about what's going on here, we have light hitting this solar cell and it's converting to electrical outputs right here. But the most important thing we want to talk about is both energy and power with this. Here's another example. That's just a plain battery. And then here's a light bulb. And then so I can connect the bulb right here and touch it right there. And it should come on. There it goes. See, it was on. That's on, right? Yeah. Off, on, off, on. So, but definitely there's an electric current going through here. This has energy stored here. There's light here. There's thermal energy. Energy and power are very important. So you should have already had a physics course where you looked at work and energy. So let's just really quickly review the main ideas because we're going to use them a lot. I like to start with this example. Here's a ball of mass M, and it's above some ground, a height h. And we want to find out how fast it's going when it gets down to the bottom. So let's say it starts from rest, v1 equals 0. I'm going to use scalar values here. v2 equals we don't know. Now, you could say, well, I'm going to use Newton's second law. I'm going to say the net force in the y direction is mass times acceleration in the y direction, and the net force is the gravitational force, mg. And then I can use that to find the acceleration, and then I can use the kinematic equations to find the final speed. That works. But when we're given a situation like this, where we don't really care about time, but we do care about change in position, it turns out that we can redo the problem using work energy. So the work energy principle says this. It says the work done on a system, that's important. Let me write that down there. System is equal to the change in energy of the system. Well, what's the change? What's the work and what's the change in energy? So we define work done by a force. Force is a vector. Displacement delta r is a vector. This will be my vector delta r. And this is the dot product. And if you're not familiar with that, it's not a big deal. I'm not going to do crazy dot product things in my class. And what we do need to understand it, that we have these two vectors and we get a scalar answer out of it. So that the amount of work depends on the force, the displacement, and the angle between them. So we can actually write that like this. This is a better way that's more easily understood. This is the magnitude of the force, the magnitude of the displacement, and theta is the angle between the force and the displacement. So in this case, gravity does work, and the angle between them is 0. And what's the cosine of 0? 1. That comes up a lot, so you should know that. Or you don't have to know that, but you're going to know that because you're going to use it a lot. So that's work. It's how much force and displacement it is done on a system, and it changes the energy. Now, what about energy? Well, energy depends, the kinds of energy depends on our system. So let's just look at this case. If I have the system of the ball, just the ball, not the earth, then I'm going to have the work done on the system. Work is going to be the gravitational force, mg, times the displacement, which is h, that's how far it falls, h, and the angle between them is 0, so that's cosine of 0 is 1. And that's going to be equal to the change in kinetic energy of the ball. So if I have a ball, the only kind of energy I have is kinetic energy. This is energy associated with an object moving. So we can calculate the kinetic energy of a point mass like this ball as 1/2 times the mass times the velocity, the magnitude of the velocity squared. So this will be 1/2 mv final squared, change always means final minus initial, minus 1/2 mv initial squared. And if I start from rest, that term 0. Don't forget this change. The change is important. And then I can solve this for the final velocity. It's not too hard. mgh is 1/2 mv2 squared. The mass cancels. I multiply by 2 and take the square root, and I get v2 equals the square root of 2gh. And that's how I would use the work energy principle here. Okay. Now, it turns out that I could pick a different system. Let's pick the system of the ball plus the Earth. In that case, there is no work done on the ball as it falls because, yes, there's a gravitational force on the ball, but the ball also pulls on the Earth. So that's really an interaction between these two objects, and they're both in the system. Of course, the ball still falls and it still speeds up. So in order to analyze this situation, I have to have a change in kinetic energy plus a change in potential energy. And I can do that if I define the change in potential energy as delta U is mg delta y, the change in height. And that's true near the surface of the Earth. And if I do that, you can see that I get the same answer, okay? The same final velocity. So let's just review some of the types of energy that you may have seen, and maybe we'll see some more. I'll show you a couple. So we have kinetic energy, 1/2 mv squared. And again, what kinds of energy you have depend on your system. If I only have the ball, I cannot have potential energy for just a point mass. So that's my kinetic energy. I have and then we really want to deal with changes, but that's just the one value of it. I'm going to call this the gravitational potential mgy. That's the gravitational potential on near the surface of the Earth. We also have a real gravitational potential energy. I'm going to use big G, negative G m1 m2 over r. So this is an important one because we're going to see something very similar to this. This is the constant. These are the two masses that are interacting, and this is the distance between them. And it does have to be negative. And then you saw this, the spring potential energy, as 1/2 ks squared. So k is the stiffness of the spring, s is the amount it's stretched or compressed. You may have seen something like this, the change in energy thermal. I'll write it out. And you probably saw this in chemistry. mc delta T. So this is the mass of an object. This is the specific heat capacity, and that's the change in temperature. So if you change the temperature of an object, you change its thermal energy. We will use this some because we talk about if I have this light bulb, the wire gets hot, and so that is important. So we will use that a little bit. Are there any other energies that you saw? I'm just trying to think. That's probably it. Now I'll go ahead and tell you, if we have an electric field, which we do, this gravitational potential energy is due to the gravitational force. And so we have an electric force, so we also have an electric potential, and it looks like this. I'll call it UC as 1/4 pi epsilon naught Q1 Q2 over R, or K Q1 Q2 over R. Now, I'm doing this because it looks a lot like this. This is the potential energy between two electric charges, Q1 and Q2. K is equal to 1/4 pi epsilon naught, and that's just a constant, just like G is a constant. It doesn't really matter too much. And R is the distance between them. But you can see that these are very similar. That's negative because you can only have positive masses, and this is always an attractive force. You could have a positive or a negative charge, so this could be a positive or negative depending on the kind of charges that you have. Okay, so that's energy. I'm doing this quick, right? This is not a full lesson on energy. Um, oh, let's talk about this. Units, because that is important. If I have work and my units is, let's say it's F delta R cosine theta. If F is in newtons and delta R is in meters, and cosine theta has no units, right, because it's a ratio, then the work done would be in units of joules, where 1 joule is equal to 1 kilogram meter squared per second squared, or 1 newton meter. You could do the same equivalent. And that's the unit of energy that we really want to use, because it's SI units, right? It deals with our base units of kilograms, meters, and seconds, which is exactly what we want. And that's in joules. There are other units of energy that we're not going to work on as much. There's the calorie, if you look at in chemistry, and then there's the calorie. This one's always funny, right? Because we have the calorie and the calorie, and they're actually two different units, but they're the same thing. One's a food calorie and one's a chemistry calorie. I mean, it's not a big deal to me. There are other units like the electron volt. That's a pretty cool one. But yeah, and then there's some like amp hours, but those depend on a particular battery. Those are units of energy. Great. Okay, so now let's talk about power. And let me look at a quick example. Suppose I have, let's say, a pretty heavy box, and I want to lift it up onto this table that's 1 meter high. And so let's say this is a 10 kilogram box, and I want to lift it up here. Well, that takes a certain amount of energy, right? I can say, well, the change in potential energy of this is going to be 10 times 9.8 times 1. That's a change in gravitational potential energy. So delta E is approximately 100 joules, right? 10 times 9.8, I'm using 10, times 1. So it's 100 joules to get it up there. Now, what if I take let's say I take 100 seconds. So delta T is 100 seconds. That's a pretty long time. That's, minute and a half. So I'll take a minute and a half to move that up here. And maybe I'm doing that with a tiny little motor that works with gears and goes and it moves up there. And then maybe I do it in 1 second. So let's go. I could probably do that, okay, myself, or even less. There's still the same change in energy to move it up here, but there is something different, and that's the power. So we define power as how fast we change the energy. It's the change in energy per time. So let's do this two ways. Power 1 is going to be the change in energy of 100 joules divided by 100 seconds, and that's going to be 1. 1 what? 1 watt. Watt? What? Watt is a unit of power, where 1 watt is equal to 1 joule per second. Now, in the other case, the power is going to be equal to 100 joules divided by, that's a J, divided by 1 second. That's going to be 100 watts. So the same change in energy, but different power. Okay. That does come up a lot of times, because if we look at this solar panel, we don't really care about how much energy, right? I care about the power, because it's going to always be receiving energy from light and sending it out, and it's things like that that we want to talk about with power. There are other units of power. There's the horsepower, which is, what is this? Is it 1 horsepower in joule? I forgot. 1 HP in, watts. It is 746. 1 horsepower is equal to 745.7 watts. Another good thing to remember is, a normal human, they can do stuff. They can lift boxes. And a normal human 100 watts is easily done by a human. 200 watts we can do for a short amount of times. But if you want to get powers over that, we can only do it for very short amount of times unless you're like an elite athlete. Also, I like to think about the 60-watt light bulb. If you have an older incandescent 60-watt light bulb, that's how much energy it uses. A normal, they're called 60-watt, but an LED light bulb is usually more around like 10 watts, but has the brightness of 60-watt bulb. I do want to talk about one more thing that I just thought about now, and that's efficiency. So let's just really quickly talk about efficiency. And I'm going to spell it probably incorrectly. Efficient. I think I got it. So a lot of times, if I look at going back to this, I have my light bulb. And so there's energy coming out of the battery. I have a decrease in energy of the battery, and then I have light energy produced by this. We define efficiency, E, as the change in energy that's useful divided by the change in energy. That's one way to do it. You can do it with power too if it takes the same amount of time. So let's say that I have this battery and it's connected to a light bulb. And then I get, let's say, 1 joule of light energy. And then the change in energy of the battery, delta E of the battery, is, let's say, it's negative 10 joules. I'm just making up something here. So I decrease in 10 joules of the battery. I get 1 joule of light. Now, where did the other 9 joules go? It went into, heat and things like that. Heat would be equal to 9 joules. So now I can calculate the efficiency of this setup. The efficiency is going to be the change in useful energy, 1 joule, divided by the total change. I'm going to use the magnitude of both of these because I don't really care. And that's going to be 10 joules. So this is going to be 0.1 efficiency, which is equal to 10%. So this would be a 10% efficient light bulb. It's probably even less than that. Most of the incandescent light bulbs are really low. Because what this says is how much of the energy that I want to get out do I actually get out, right? You're never going to get it all out. There's always going to be some heat. But the more heat you get, the less. Now, this is my favorite example. Incandescent light bulbs are terrible because they get so hot. But you can actually have the same device and change the efficiency if you change the use, right? If I take this light bulb and use it to heat up a tiny little cake, then the useful energy output would be 90. So E would be, 9 over 10, or 90%. It'd be 90% efficient. And that's if you have one of those really old easy bake ovens, they actually use a light bulb to heat up things. So if you're using that light bulb to heat stuff up, you can have a much higher efficiency. So we'll talk about this some because it does matter. What's the efficiency of a solar panel? What's the efficiency of a battery? If we want to talk about energy, we need to talk about where all that energy goes. Okay, I think that's enough energy. Energy in joules, power in watts, efficiency has no units because it's a ratio. The end.